This is Search Marketing Now, broadcasting live from our home base here in the New York area. As Peter said, I am Chris McDonough, and on behalf of the Search Marketing Now webcast team and Optify, our sponsor, thank you very much for joining us for this emerging topic, using personas to boost online marketing and SEO. Today we are very happy to welcome our very own Vanessa Fox from Search Engine Land and our friends at Optify, Arz Barack. How are you guys today?
Great.
Great, doing well. Thank you, Chris.
Sure, Erez, and thanks again for being here. But before I turn things over to Vanessa, who is going to get us all started, I want to let our audience know just a couple of things. If you need help or have a question for our speaker, just use that Ask a Question box, and we will do our best to help you out. If you want to tell a friend or check out Optify or Search Marketing Now, there are some widgets at the bottom of your screen. You can just click below and check out the websites or email a friend. We are also standing by on Q&A, so if you could make good use of that Ask a Question box, we will get to as many as we possibly can during our live presentation. We are also standing by on Twitter today. Our hashtag is SMNNow, so go ahead and use that. And finally, as always, we are recording this broadcast. We will make it available for viewing later on this afternoon on demand 24/7. I will let you know when it's ready, or you can just check our website at searchmarketingnow.com and look under the on-demand section. Okay, with all the business taken care of, let's get started by finding out a little bit more about our audience. Have you used or are you currently using personas? Answers are possible. Never heard of it. I've heard of personas but never used them. I've used personas but not as a part of my search activity, or I've used personas as part of my organic search activity. So the way these work, if you're new to us, is just hit one of those radio buttons and hit Submit Answer. And Vanessa, I'm going to give everybody a little bit of time to answer that question, so why don't I go ahead and introduce you during that period of time. That is pretty Vanessa right there. She is a contributing editor to Search Engine Land and author of the book Marketing in the Age of Google. She also owns 9x9, which provides education, consulting, and tools for building search best practices into organizations at the technical and strategic level. All right. Vanessa, let me check here. Yes, we do have the results in. I'm going to push them out for you. Looks like it's pretty much spread across the board. What do you think?
Yeah, and this is great that most people have either heard about or used personas, and we even have some people who are using searcher personas now as part of their SEO activity. So that's great.
Okay, I'm going to push out your first slide, and you are free to go.
Great. So, yeah, thanks everybody for joining. This is a subject that I'm very interested in. My, background from way back in the day has been in usability and user experience, and then I worked for Google and Search for a while, and really, got a really good sense of how search engines are looking to, really provide the very best result for searchers. And, I think traditionally SEO has really focused on the keyword level. And when you think about it, I started thinking about this when I was at Google, and certainly, once I left, was this idea that instead of looking at things at the keyword level, we could really look at things from the task level and figure out how can we really solve people's problems and, really addressing things that way. So a couple of years ago, I was working on writing my book, and I ran into Tamara Adlin, who some of you may know. She's done a lot of work in usability and personas, and she's here in Seattle. And, we got together and started talking. And she'd written this book called the Persona Life Cycle, and there's a newer one called The Essential Persona Life Cycle. And we found that the things that she did as part of her persona work and part of her usability work was very similar to the kinds of things that I was thinking about in terms of solving people's problems as they type them into the search box. And there's just so much overlap there. And so, as part of writing the book, I really started developing this, and I worked with her a bit. She ended up writing part of one of my chapters called Searcher Personas. And, since the book came out, I've been really working with a lot of organizations on, how to really build this in. So today I just wanted to, briefly kind of talk about, my approach to this and how I think that you can really think of your SEO efforts more in terms of connecting with customers and solving their problems, helping them accomplish their tasks, sort of move away from the keyword level approach to SEO. And I think it really helps engagement and conversion and ranking and, kind of the whole thing. So great stuff. So this slide that you're seeing here is just sort of when Tamara and I started working on this, and we ended up turning this into a full-day workshop that we give various places as well. But really, SEO and user experience are very related. And the thing that's nice is that if you work in SEO and you have trouble getting buy-in from your organization, which can happen because people have a lot of misconceptions sometimes about SEO. But when you bring this approach to them, at least I often find that people are very relieved, people who aren't in SEO, and they go, oh my gosh, I thought that SEO was all about spam or whatever, but now I can see that SEO is actually all about building better products and engaging with people. And so your non-SEO marketing people, your user experience people, your product people, and even your developers, I find, can more easily get on board when you sort of describe it in these ways. So if you aren't familiar with personas, and it looks like some of you are and some of you aren't, it's this idea that's been around long before search, and it's just this idea that you instead of looking at your products as distinct tasks, you instead think about who is a person that needs my product, what are they trying to accomplish? And by really looking at your product that way, it really helps you make sure that you have a consistent workflow, that you really are solving people's problems. And it's just it's a nice shorthand way of thinking about your audience. So what you do, and I'll show this a little bit in my slides, is that you pick a person, and obviously you're not building for that particular person, but it's sort of an aggregate of a type of person who's trying to accomplish a certain kind of task. But by identifying them as a person, I think you identify with them more, and it really helps you step outside. It's really easy for us to see things from our own perspective because we've been working with the product so much, and it's hard to see things fresh from the audience's eyes, and so this really helps you kind of step outside and see that. This is my poor attempt at graphic skills, but this is just kind of showing the overlap, and this top arrow is sort of how I think of SEO. I don't just think of it, as keywords at the search level and how well you rank, but really, what are people searching for? What does that search result display look like? Because that's really the starting point of the user experience of your site, is really at that search box and what that display looks like, and you want to compel people to click on it, and then once they click, then you get that page content. Does this actually solve their problem? But then what's the conversion, and are you motivating them to convert? And so, I really think about SEO as being this whole process, and you can see I've sort of mapped how that relates to what Tamara does with her user experience work, and so I think there's a lot of nice overlaps there. In building searcher personas, what Tamara and I did is that we sort of integrated our two approaches. And so this first part is sort of her approach, which I love and I use all the time, and it works great. And it's very low tech. You just get a bunch of sticky notes and some Sharpies, and you put people in a room. And so the very first thing that you always have to do is clarify the business goals. And, when I talk to people, I find that this is really the hardest part. And it's integral to SEO, to user experience, to product development, really to anything you do in your organization. But really, what are you trying to accomplish with your website? Why are you in business? I talk to a lot of people about their SEO efforts, and I say, okay, well, what are your business goals? And they say, to get a lot of traffic. But that's not actually a business goal, right? What kind of traffic are you trying to get? What are you looking for those people to do once they get on your website? And so you really kind of want to isolate that before you start, because if you're not starting from the right foundation, then you're going to head off in the wrong direction. So these are just a few questions to ask. What's the project goal? What's the brand goal? And then what's your value prop? The project goal, tends to be tied to how you make money. The brand objective is really kind of around that, brand perception that you're looking to convey. And then your value prop, goes back to thinking about what is it that you're really offering to the user. Why would they want to come to your site or buy your products versus someone else in the marketplace? And that kind of helps you, think beyond your own needs and think about the needs of the audience. Again, this is all at a super high level just to kind of give you a sense of it. Obviously, there's a lot of details involved in all of this, but just at a high level, you want to think about your audiences and then map those audiences to what they want, which conversion events and engagement events apply to them, and then what motivates them. So what you end up with is all of these building blocks, right? So, one is what are the conversion events? Oh, I want to sell something, for instance. Engagement events, right? I want people to share my content or comment or leave reviews, whatever the case may be. And then for each audience that you have, not every audience is going to map to the same conversion events and engagement events, right? So you want to kind of figure that out. Then you want to think about what really motivates them. Why would they want to do this? And when you break it down into building blocks like that, it can really help you put a structure around your strategy. So you can start out very simply with these sticky notes. You can just have people in a room just brainstorm. You know your audience pretty well already, and so you can just have everyone write down on these sticky notes a person and an action. And so that action is either a problem they have, a task that they want to accomplish, and you just kind of have people go for it. You can play some music, make things fun, whatever. And then what you end up with is a whole bunch of sticky notes that you can then categorize, right, into different clusters. And here, this is just an example of how you would cluster that. And here's a specific example. This is from a site called YogaSpot that Tamara and I worked on here in Seattle. And, what we found was that for this yoga site, which had basically yoga videos on demand, we had all these different audiences, right? New people who didn't know much about yoga, someone who'd done it but wasn't really actively doing it, and then you had these experienced people. And you can see from the pink stickies kind of have the categories, and then the yellow stickies have the details. Obviously, you'd end up with a lot more. You can see a picture here of one from an actual workshop that we did. And from here, you can start to build a skeleton of what these personas are, right? So you can see this example with YogaSpot. We have Becky Busy. We found that she wants to do yoga, but she's really busy. It's hard to build it into her schedule. She doesn't want to have to go to a class. She wants to be able to maybe do it from home. She wants maybe shorter alternatives. So you start to build this description of who this person is. Now, where the search piece really comes in, and this was, my piece to this, is you can validate these assumptions with all the data that's available from search, right? So all the things that you generally already do for keyword research. So competitive analysis, looking at social media, looking at things like Google Insights, and then doing keyword research, you can start to see, okay, I think that this is what people want and what their problems are. Is this actually the case, right? And so you do all of your normal things for keyword research, and then you cluster those things. And you then associate those clusters with your persona. So here you can see an example of the YogaSpot site. We've clustered this into, types of yoga, poses, and then this one in particular, at home. So what we found was that a lot of people are searching for things like yoga DVDs, yoga videos, and yoga books. And so instead of looking at that at a keyword level, we clustered that into a task that someone is looking to accomplish, which is, I want to do yoga but not in a studio. Right? So those words aren't even part of the cluster, but that is fundamentally the task. And so we could associate this cluster of keywords with Becky Busy. So then, of course, you want to map that and then figure out, well, how important are these people, right? Because you're mapping these to the conversion events and to these motivations. And so you really want to kind of take a look and see, now that I have all of this data, where should I start? What should the strategy be? So here's the persona for Becky Busy. You can see that there's all this information about her that just helps you kind of understand where she's coming from. And then you end up with a grid like this. And so here's the persona, here's the task that she wants to accomplish. I want to do yoga at home, not in a studio. These are the types of queries that she does, yoga DVD, yoga video. What's your value prop, right? So this is where all the building blocks start to come in. How can we help her accomplish this task? Oh, well, we have actually a bunch of videos that she can do on demand. Well, we also have other things that she wasn't actually searching for, but she may find them compelling. She can save her progress. She can pause. She can come back to where she left off. Then we look at what are the conversion events related to her, right? And so we map those. And then we take a look at, well, what's going to motivate her to do those things, right? Because when we look at that page, we want to make sure that her motivators are there on that page. And then you can, of course, monitor, see what types of metrics you would use to see if you're successful. So then, of course, you're going to have to say, well, now I've got all of these things that I want to do, that I want to evaluate the site for. How do I prioritize where to start? And these slides will be available later. I won't go through all of them now, but you can do a bunch of assessments to kind of see that. So now you've got this row in the grid, and so you want to map that. If you have an existing site, you want to map that to your content. If it's a new site, then you would map that to what you need. And so this is going to help you figure out your gaps and what you might need to consolidate and what kind of adjustments that you might need to make on your existing pages. Here's an example of a different site, Microsoft Web Matrix. And so, we've got this guy who's brand new. He wants to build a website. Here are all the pages that map to that now. So you might want to take a look and go, okay, do we need to consolidate those pages? Do we need to differentiate them? And then just here's a quick example from Alaska Airlines. So here's one page that meets two different persona needs. So we've got a non-member and a member. The non-member, we still want to be happy. The member, though, we have this additional goal where maybe he'll sign up for SMS alerts because this is a new thing that we want people to sign up for. So taking a look at that, both of these types of people might be searching for what terminal does Alaska fly into LAX. You can see here that they rank number 1, so that's already great. You land on the page. It's a great user experience. So that's all fine. But if you then think about, what was my conversion event for each of these? Well, in the case of the member, we also wanted him perhaps to sign up for SMS alerts, right, to see when his gate or the terminal might change. We know that he's highly motivated because he was interested in this. And so you can see that the only suggestion here would be to add that call to action that motivates based on his task. And his task was, I want to know where I'm flying into. Right, and so that would be a very easy way to get some uptick on your goal. So here's just a quick thing to look at for every page then once you've started to set this up. You want to make sure that page works well as the entry of the site, helps them accomplish the task, and compels conversion. And then you want to set metrics not based on the keyword level, but based on those clusters that you set up. And you can easily set this up in analytics to have those clusters of keywords match what you came up with, and so then you can kind of see if you're being successful for each persona in each task. Here are the books that Tamara and I wrote that give you more information, and that's a very high-level overview, but I hope it's helpful. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Vanessa. We are ready for our next polling question, so I am going to push this out to the audience, and then in between then I'm going to introduce Erez and get him ready to get going. So here's the second polling question. How much time in a month do you invest in SEO? A few hours, 1 to 2 days, a week, most of the time, or nothing? Okay, the usual MO here, same drill before. Just hit one of those radio buttons and hit Submit Answer. And I'm going to take the time in between here to introduce our friend Erez from Optify. Arz Barack is the Vice President of Products and co-founder of Optify. He speaks frequently, as you will find out soon enough. He's an expert. And prior to Optify, Erez was a Director of Product Marketing in HP Software Business Unit. He was also recently named among the top 25 innovators in 2010 by Seattle Business Magazine. Okay, Erez, I hope you're ready to go. I have our results back, and boy, it looks like a big whopping let me push these out to you. Sorry about that. Whopping big portion of them, 40% of them went most of the time. So that's good news.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we are ready to go. We actually had a fire drill here in the building for a couple of minutes, got us worried, but it's all done now, and everyone is all right.
Never a dull moment, huh?
Oh, no, never a dull moment.
Well, we're happy to have you back. Go ahead, dive in.
Yeah, so glad to be back. Interesting to see the results, probably somewhat skewed by the audience we're bringing in around the time you invest per month in SEO. And the reason we're really asking this question is sort of the second part of the presentation after Vanessa sort of set the stage, talked about the strategy and why we would need personas. We would like to provide or run you through a simple example of using a simple framework of defining your personas, aligning keywords with them and pages with them. And we believe this is a framework anyone can use. You can go very deep on each one of the steps. You can also just run through the steps. We recommend just having that framework in place and then working through it. So 5 key steps we're going to talk about. First, knowing your audience. Second, well, once you know them, what's their pain point? What's bothering them? What are they trying to solve? How do you provide real solutions or providing real solutions for those pain points and then making sure they're compelling? And while you do that, make sure that in real time you can measure the impact of what you're doing and how you're reaching that audience. So in order to run through the example, we actually chose Tip Top Shoes. Tip Top Shoes is a store in New York City. We don't work with the store in New York City. I've shopped there a couple of times, but that's about it. The reason I believe this is a very interesting example is that this is a business that has not only local SEO needs, as you would expect from a store within a city, but also global SEO needs. A lot of tourists coming into town, learning a lot about where to shop, what to do while they're or before their trip to New York City. So having sort of this SEO need or understanding the audience, not only locally but rather globally as well, I think makes for a very interesting example here. So let's take the first step for Tip Top Shoes. And this is the framework. You could see the framework and the 5 steps I've defined in the beginning. We're going to sort of augment this framework as we run through this example. But step 1 is really know your audience. So again, putting search aside for a minute, who is most likely to turn into a customer? Who is my perfect buyer? Who is going to come in the store or find me online and buy what I have to offer? And, in this case, and what we're saying, well, it's women. They're probably 18 to 35. They're looking for running shoes. And actually, there are a few brands they're really excited about. So sort of, I think this is a key point that Vanessa really highlighted. Detach from search. Detach from what they actually do. Think of who they are. Once you know who they are, put that in the first step of the framework, the target audience. Now, we have a set of tools that helps us define the target audience. I thought I'd share one of them. And this is a great tool from, actually, Nielsen now owns this for segmentation. So we have the source link. You can go and check it out later. What this allows you to do is plug in your zip code. And then it has this CAPTCHA, so no one automates it. And once you plug in your zip code, it actually provides segmentation data about your audience. So in this case, we plugged in our local zip code, and it provides segments of people who are local. So they call this segment the American Dream. It's upper, middle age, family mix. They give you the demographics data, some stats about it, and some lifestyle traits. So again, in this example, if I'm a local business and I know where my people are, or if I'm a national business and I know what kind of areas I'm really attractive in, I can actually use this tool to test who the segments are, who the people that are out there are and how they're defined and profiled, and we use that as one of the inputs for that first step, which is knowing your target audience. So moving on to the next step. We got the target audience. Now, key, again, we're not in search yet. Understand their pain points. Understand and learn how they search in order to solve for their issue. You also need to ask yourself, how would this search be articulated? And if you could see in the table right here, in this case, the searcher's pain point is pretty clear. They need new running shoes. Again, we're looking at the woman, 18 to 35, looking for running shoes. Well, you got to make sure they find what they need. Now, the next step we want to have, again, or the next column here is search queries and actually understanding what they're searching for. So there are many, many ways to do keyword research. There are many tools to do keyword research. There are also many methods to go about it. We wanted to highlight two of them. One, which we really like here, is tweet stats. Tweet stats allows you to get an understanding of, well, based on your needs, what people are looking for. And again, the idea is not to find really trendy words and try to rank for them or try to optimize for them. The idea is to see what's trending, then align that with what's relevant to your target audience and their pain point, and only if you get that alignment, choose those keywords. Another method we frequently use is actually on ask.com. They have what they call Ask People, where you can plug in a question. So we plugged in, where can I buy tennis shoes? And they provide some different or related questions that people are actually asking when they want to buy tennis shoes. So in this case, they ask, where can I buy Coach tennis shoes? And where can I buy Fila tennis shoes? Again, the idea is get the full scope of the keywords and related keywords and choose what's relevant. So, I mentioned keyword research. There's also surveys you can run with your target audience or your prospects. There's market research you can use for this, but nailing this point of, well, what are the keywords that actually align to the pain points is key to get step 2 right. Now comes the interesting part. Well, we know who they are. We know what their pain points are. We know what the search queries they're looking for or would be looking for are. Now, make sure you create great content that's well optimized for the engines. Of course, the key is aligning that to what your target customer is searching for. So if we think about it, there's a set of pain keywords or keywords that highlight what kind of pain you have. And then there's a set of solution pages. Now, I know this says create great content. Turns out that many times you have that great content. You have the content that aligns with that pain point, but you got to make sure you have that alignment. So tactically speaking, we look at two places for that alignment. One is aligning the solution page to the pain keyword. So what you see here is a list of pages. This is an example of a site we have. And then for each one of those pages, we don't only track some metrics, and I'll talk about metrics in step 5, but we also align a set of target keywords. A page can only be about so many keywords, can only reflect so many keywords. So once you know the keywords and you have the solution pages, either by creating them or just saying, well, this is the page I really want them to hit, you want to make sure you have that alignment and target the right pages with the right pain keywords. The other alignment we're looking for is sort of, I call this more real-world alignment. This is about tracking the keywords you decided to go after and seeing what they're ranking for. There's always, there's the notion of, let's use my keywords and get a page ranked, but many times we find that for a certain keyword, even if I did not mean to get ranked for a certain page, turns out a different page than I was targeting got ranked for it. So tracking this alignment between keyword and actual ranked page, again, helps you make sure you keep the connection between the two aligned. And whenever someone searches for a keyword, they actually find what they need. So what you would do here, if there's perfect alignment, great. Keep tracking it. If there's no alignment, two ways to go. One, if you can, and typically this is the simpler way to go, align the content to that keyword. Well, I know you tried for running shoes, but turns out this page ranks for after work shoes. Fine. Maybe we adjust the content to align with what's coming in. The other option, adjust your SEO, adjust your links, adjust your on-page optimization to align with the keyword you're really going after, and make that change. Next step, I find it pretty obvious in terms of title, be compelling, but again, often overlooked, and this is one of the reasons we like the framework. We say, make sure you've checked off on all of these. And based on the time you're spending, you may spend more time on figuring out the target audience or the solution pages versus this step, but it's an important step to look at. So again, as an example, we were actually using a screenshot from our friends at Attention Wizard, and many times it comes to either a landing page you want to test or an actual page you want to test. Make sure you run these tests on a regular basis. They have great stats around the optimization of a landing page and how the conversion changes dramatically as you optimize the page. But make sure, again, you know what keyword you went after. You know the pain point. You actually got ranked for a page that's relevant. Make sure that page is compelling and it actually delivers what you need in terms of business value, which in our case is, well, have someone buy shoes. Last step, again, key step to getting this right is knowing what to measure. As Vanessa highlighted earlier, as we see on a regular basis, this is an iterative process. You find a target audience. You find a pain point. There may be multiple pain points, so you'll find yourself using multiple frameworks at the same time. You may have created a set of content that worked to some extent, but now you want to iterate, tune, and refine what you're doing. So you can guess what's working and what's not, and unfortunately many a times we feel that we don't see that much of a metric-driven approach, but what we're saying, you really got to close the loop here with metrics. Now, I sort of categorize, just as a last note, I categorize the metrics into two buckets. One is around SEO indicators. You're running an SEO campaign. You want to hit a target audience. Well, you have some leading indicators to know if this is working for your business or not. I say they're leading indicators because the goal, again, is getting more business in the door. The goal is increasing conversion to paid customers. The goal is to increase the number of people purchasing on your site. But you got to make sure you're tracking the keyword ranks, the ranks over time and the trend. You know, ranks can be it could change pretty frequently, but looking at an over time trend shows you how you rank and sort of cleans out that noise. And also, if relevant, again, if there is more of an international view you need, or you're focusing on more than one engine, make sure you check the rank in all these multiple engines. So I would say there's the Google engine in the US. You could check Google Local as for different metro areas. You can also check Bing and Yahoo as other engines, as well as see how you're doing internationally if relevant. But all of these are leading indicators. The second set of indicators we look at are, well, how is this making a change for my business? Well, if my business is about page views and ad serving, and I'm a publisher, and I really want to get eyeballs on my site, make sure you align the keywords and the content you've optimized with how many page views they drive. If it's all about the number of visitors, then go the next step and putting page views aside, make sure you have the right set of visitors. Typically, it's the bottom two. It's about conversion and it's about revenue. Well, conversion is how many people started using your product, how many people actually purchased something. And when it comes to revenue, it's really stepping back and saying, fine, let's look, and you see this on the top right here. Let's look at our CRM system or whatever system you use to track revenue and make sure we can highlight which percentage of the revenue came from search. And even go a level deeper and say, well, from that bucket, what came from organic search? And then take the final step and say, well, these words really converted best. And now that you have that end-to-end view, you go back to the framework iterate on that, and make sure you have it nailed. So before we go to the Q&A, and I'll turn this over to Chris again, 4 key takeaways we have. We're very excited about the usage of search personas to align your strategy with your business goals. At the end of the day, it's about the end customer. Taking a step back, taking that view, and then mapping it into what I would call more practical day-to-day SEO tactics is a great strategy or a great overall framework to take this. Framework hopefully makes it easy and a repeatable process. Again, you're going to decide how much time you spend on this. You can spend a couple of hours, create the framework, probably going to be pretty shallow on each one of the steps, but at least you'll have an idea of where you're heading, and as you iterate on it, may go deeper in any one of the steps. You may take a bigger project and say, well, I want to create this framework before I do anything, and that's where you typically see most of the results. But the idea is put something out there that makes it a repeatable process. Measure in real time. Again, key to success. Whatever you do, well, generally in online marketing, but specifically when you run an SEO campaign, you want to make sure you have the right measurement, you have the right data, and you're reacting to data. And when it comes to data, rank is great. Rank is exciting, but it's definitely not enough. Measure the next step. Measure the real business impact that these personas are driving for you. So.
Thank you, Erez. Thank you very much. It's, as you mentioned, time for the Q&A. So everybody out there, make good use of that ask a question box if you've got some questions, and we will do our best to get to them. But it is, as it is right now, we've got a couple in the queue waiting for us. A couple, I should say, 1 million in the queue, right? And Vanessa, you there? I'm going to call you back in. But this,
I am.
Terrific. This first one is to Erez. Here we go. What does Erez use to match a persona to a pain point or queries for a persona?
So, again, this is, let's say we've defined the target audience, the persona, and we know what the pain point is. What I typically do is start with, as I mentioned, keyword research. Get a few keywords in place to sort of set the stage for my research. Once I have that, I expand them. I use keyword clusters. I use the ask.com. I use Google Trends to understand where the market is heading, not necessarily where it is. I then take that set of keywords, I bucket them under a set of categories that align to my business or the customer's business, and start targeting those categories or those keywords. But typically, it starts with a simple keyword search to sort of seed my research.
Okay, thanks. Erez, here is the next question up. How do search personas differ from the user personas used for web design, and can each one be used for each discipline?
I think it's actually a great question for Vanessa to tackle first. This is, I think, a key point in her expertise. I'll let you answer first, Vanessa.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, and the key here is that you want to use the same personas, right? You don't have a different set of things you do for SEO and a different set of things you do for user experience. I think the key is integrating them so that it's one set of things that you do. So what we like to do is that if a company has already developed personas, we use those as a starting point. And we say, all right, so what are these personas searching for? And, we just sort of start the process back at the search box. If they haven't developed personas, then we use the persona development for both their user experience and their SEO efforts, right? Well, because what we're trying to do is create one task flow for the user that starts where they type into a search box, they see the display in the search result, they land on the page, and then they keep going deeper into the website. So it's really all one workflow. The exception to that really is that from a product development and user experience perspective, you will end up with some personas or some tasks that would not start at a search box, right? Like someone who's already logged in, right, and they're doing something as a member behind a login. But even with those, it's going to start with the same kind of persona, like either that's how they find the site, or that's how they remember the site. And you can still also use the data from search for those people. But I think it certainly is the case that you would have an extended version of personas and tasks for those items, like when someone is doing a checkout and a shopping cart, right? So you just want to kind of continue that process. But I would not think of them as being separate sets of personas.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with Vanessa here. I think a key difference to highlight is that with search personas, it's really key to ID the keywords they actually will use to find what you're putting out there. You typically don't see that if the focus hasn't been search personas, but extending what's out there is typically the right step in that direction. I do see a lot of customers who don't have search personas. Now, when you come in and talk about personas, they're like, oh, no, that's not key. Let's skip that step. Let's go directly into keywords. I feel strongly about, stepping back, spending some time defining that persona, even based on the data they have now. So you don't really have to do a lot to get that persona in the door, and only then align the strategy to that.
Okay, thanks, you guys. I'm going to keep moving on here because we have quite a few, and let's get to as many as we can. Here's the next one. Is it really better to use exact match when it comes to keyword research or for personas?
So, we do this a couple of ways. We use broad match to start with, just to see generally what people are searching for and how they're searching for it. Then when we use exact match is when we're looking more specifically at market opportunity. So when we're into the prioritization piece of it, and we're working with someone who's like, well, should we invest in resources to build out this or this first, right? If you really want to assess market opportunity, and you there's some calculations, right, that you can sort of do to say, all right, if there's this amount of volume, and we think we can get this number of clicks, what would that ultimately be worth to us? So if you go back and think about the slide that I had about the keyword clustering, that example of yoga at home, and we had books, videos, DVDs, once we got to that level, we did exact match, because then we could see, all right, if you build out this landing page that talks about doing yoga at home and how what they have to offer is better than books and is like a library of DVDs, where you're sort of incorporating the keywords in, what is the market opportunity there? But I do start with broad match just to start, because it does sort of give you a sense of how to dive in deeper.
I think when measuring the keywords, so, okay, let's say you've gone through the exercise. You've got to a point where you went from broad to specific keywords. When measuring your efforts, seeing what kind of impact you're making, what potential you have, looking at an exact view of the world is really a more practical and realistic way to set the expectation and reach your full potential. Because if I ended up with a set of 10 keywords and I'm looking at their phrase monthly volume and setting that as the expectation or the goal for my SEO campaign, that's probably far out. But if I look at an exact view of the same keywords, that really sets more realistic goals and opportunities based on the keywords I found.
Okay, thanks, you guys. This one I'm going to ask you, but I don't know if you need to have some sort of a real demonstration of this, but see if you can handle this one. How do you set up clusters in analytics?
So I can take that one. What we do is, we just use regular expressions. And so we figure out what those clusters were from the keyword research side that we associated with the persona and the task. And, there's different ways you can do it, but you can set up reports that list all the keywords, and you can just, use include and exclude regular expressions to get those clusters. We actually draw it out further. We have some reporting that we do where we take those regular expressions and grab the Google Webmaster Tools data and the analytics data, because then you can see, all right, I went after this yoga at home audience. This was my average position for all of the keywords in the cluster, right? So for yoga DVDs, books, whatever. So you can get that from Webmaster Tools. So, this is my average position. This is the number of impressions, number of clicks, click-through rate, and then from your analytics, right, you can grab and, here's how much time those people spent on the site. This is where they went next. This is how many of them converted or signed up to be members or whatever. And so if you can get that whole flow in at that cluster level is really a nice way to look at it. If you use Google Analytics, for instance, and you use the API, you can set up your regular expressions that way or just set up your custom reports. But that's how we do it.
The approach we took within Optify is we have lists and lists of keywords that map to these clusters and map to the research you do for personas. And then using those lists, you can track the keywords, track the sort of list performance over time, compare your list with competitors' performance, and see what the opportunities are. So, I think the analogy we took is just like in Facebook when you have a bunch of friends and you put them in a list, just like here in Optify, when you have a set of keywords you want to go after, you can bucket them in lists and manage them that way.
All right, thanks again. Here is another one we're going to push out to you guys. How do you define requirements of a user? Focus groups or brainstorming? I'm not sure if you can answer that easily, but give it a shot, please.
The requirements of the user. So, when you're thinking about personas sort of separate from search, there's sort of two different types of personas, right? There's data-driven personas, and then there's ad hoc personas. The book that I mentioned of Tamara's The Essential Persona Lifecycle actually talks about both types. The data-driven type is much more about getting demographic information, psychographic information, market research, all of that stuff. But the ad hoc personas are the ones that I described that just uses the sticky notes. And the thing is, not everyone has the money and time to do the data-driven stuff, but that shouldn't be an obstacle to putting together personas because you actually can get quite a bit of great information just by putting people in a room and brainstorming for an hour. Because what that does for you is if you work at that organization, you should have at least a general sense of your customers, right? So it's not that you're starting from nothing, right? You're starting from actually a lot of great information. And by putting everyone in a room to just do that sticky note exercise, you really can find out, you get everyone's ideas out there, and you really can see, we all thought that this was our audience, but you think this is our audience. Like it's great for a lot of reasons. And then when you look at search data to back it up, that really does help you validate it. So I would give it a try. I find that it works the best if you have executives as well as support people, because those two groups tend to have a very different perspective on the audience and on the business goals and who you're trying to attract and why. And so combining those two perspectives tends to be really, really useful.
I think the use of external focus groups is, again, typically more expensive and more hard to put in place, but it turns out that most organizations have the knowledge in-house. So as a guideline, pick people who work directly with customers, whether it's support or executives who happen to meet customers or the sales team or the marketing team or the product team. Pick one of each. What's interesting is that they typically don't work with each other. You bring them all in a room, they each bring in their perspective. They get to bounce ideas off each other, and it results in a great set of data you can use as a baseline for defining, well, what does my user need?
Okay, thanks. Again, moving on to the next question here. How long, this is the question that we get asked most often, I think, in our webcast is really, how long do you monitor a keyword before determining it's not good to keyword optimize the site? Not a good keyword to optimize site.
I think that's a very interesting question. It's almost like, how long do I try to go after a keyword? How long do I pursue a certain keyword? Well, you should really look at this in the context of your full keyword list or keyword strategy or the set of clusters. So make sure you have a mix of keywords you can actually move on, and you see that on a regular basis. Also align some budget, if you may, or some space in that list for keywords that are a longer shot, keywords that you've been trying hard to get at. And those are typically higher month, or you would want these to be higher monthly value, and you want these to be more of the competitive keywords that can really create great conversion for you. But I think you should always have a set of keywords that are sort of the more visionary or longer term goals you have, and then switch within that group.
Okay, thanks. This is a question I've always wondered, and I'm sure is out there for everybody else. How much information is too much information in a persona?
So I think that you can get bogged down in the definition of a persona. Honestly, the slide that I showed of Becky Busy, that just is really that one slide of information, is a great starting point. I think you're thinking of an aggregate of users. The other thing that I think people can spend a bit too much time on is that they create too many personas, when really you can generally identify maybe up to 4, potentially up to 8, but honestly I think that most organizations do well with around 4, and then you kind of have the tasks within that, right? So I think just having that like one sheet of information to kind of give an aggregate view is plenty.
All right, here we go again with another question. We're a B2B company, and the user and buyer are different people in the organization. Who should we target as the search persona?
So I'm not sure what that means, the user and the buyer are different people. It might mean that the person who uses the website isn't the actual person that makes the purchasing decision. I'm not sure. So you can have multiple personas, but I guess if it's the case that the person you're interacting with is not the person who actually makes the buying decision, you just want to think about what are the types of things that the person you're interacting with cares about and what they need to know to get that information back. We worked with a site that the audience was like dentists. It was a dental products type thing. But one of the key personas we identified was the office manager as opposed to the dentist. So, we said, well, the office manager doesn't actually know a lot about the dental equipment. They just know that the dentist, has them out doing this research or whatever. And so we identified, okay, well, what are the things that they would need to know to get back to the dentist? So, I think thinking about the motivation of the person that you're dealing with is useful in that situation.
Yeah, I think they are, even though they're in the same company as a target audience, and one is the buyer and one is the user, they should be treated as 2 different personas. Now, assuming you cannot go after both, well, how do I pick? Well, first, business, sort of your business value. Assuming you can only target one, which one would better convert for you? Which one would create more of a business impact? And you've got to answer that internally. Then, as you go through the exercise, I think you'll also find SEO potential, right? It comes down to a set of keywords. Well, what kind of potential does the user keyword cluster have, and what kind of potential does the buyer keyword cluster have? Now, if they're very different and one is more competitive than the other, that would help drive your decision. But don't try to force them into one persona, because at the end of the day, it's got to map to the real world.
Okay, sorry, I had myself on mute. No one was listening to me. Here's another question for you. How many personas should I normally develop and maintain, and how detailed should they be?
Yes, this is kind of like what I was saying a few minutes ago.
Right.
I really think generally that 4 is a pretty good number, but it's really going to depend on your organization and your business needs. But I would just get started. I wouldn't get too caught up and spend too much time, right? Because you can always iterate on these things as you go. So I would, when you're, if you think back to the grid that I showed, you can have a lot of different tasks for a single persona. And so I think the one mistake that people make is that they, end up creating a different persona for each of the tasks, and you really don't need to do that. Where this can get kind of complicated is, say, an e-commerce site where you have the same person but at different parts of the buying cycle, right? And you don't necessarily need a different persona definition for each part of the buying cycle. You can say, okay, this is, a father who needs to buy, stuff for his kids, and maybe at one point he's in research mode and at another point he's in buying mode, but those can just be different tasks. There doesn't have to be a persona for a person in research mode versus a person in buying mode. And you can kind of set them up in different ways, but I just wouldn't overthink it.
Okay, I think we have a little more time left. Let's see if we can get to a couple more. What are ways you can encourage organic search rank through optimizing personas?
I mean, that to me is the key to why this ties in well to SEO, which is that what you want to really do is solve people's problems, and search engines are looking to rank the very best result that actually solves people's problems. And so I think we often get caught up in optimizing for keywords and then optimizing for conversion, and sometimes we forget about that part of solving people's problems. And so if you really focus that page on what are people really looking for, and if because you have mapped those keyword clusters to the page, you can say, okay, well, these are the highest volume ways that people are looking for this. So I need to make sure that I include those very, very high volume things in, say, the title tag, and on the page itself. But then I just need to make sure that this really does solve their problem, because Google in particular, right, has gotten much, much better at, from a machine learning perspective, identifying those pages that have substantial quality content versus thin content that's not super valuable. And you also just get those higher levels of engagement and links and those other secondary signals that the search engines are able to use to discern high-value content from not. So I think focusing on solving that problem is really how to get the search rankings there.
Okay, thanks. I just want to tell everybody, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have left for the live Q&A part of the broadcast. So thank you, first of all, to Vanessa and Erez for your time and great information. Really appreciate it. Erez has promised on the Optify.net to post all the Q&A on their site. So if you want to go back and take a look at it, make sure you check it out. And I have that little avatar at the bottom of the page. You can just take a look at it now if you'd like to as well, but they'll post it later on today. And if you have any questions or comments for the Search Marketing Now webcast team, we, of course, would love to hear from you at webcast@Search Marketing Now. We always welcome your feedback. We have another webcast coming up actually tomorrow. Does Facebook like your brand? Please come join us for that. You can sign up at the Search Marketing Now website as usual. And that is all for our broadcast today. We look forward to seeing you here next time right here at Search Marketing Now.